Do you remember when you were called by God? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe it hasn't happened yet. Maybe you have been called but don't know how to hear or interpret it, as in our story of Samuel today. Or maybe you have heard it and you want to run away from it, as in the story of Jonah that we will hear part of next week. Throughout the season of Advent and into Epiphany, we have heard a lot of talk about people being called. What does it mean to be called? How do we know how to answer this calling? And to what exactly are we being called? We hear about the calling of Israel to be God's people in the Old Testament, and how that is carried over and fulfilled through Christ in the New Testament. There is definite movement from the Old Testament to the New Testament, a definite connection. And that connection, that bridge, is Jesus Christ. John the Baptist is called to be the forerunner of the Messiah. Mary is called to bear the Messiah and to bring the light to the world. We could say that Mary is the vessel by which the call in the Old Testament is carried over to be the call in the New Testament. Certainly calls exist in both cultures. They are just shaped somewhat differently. There are specific events that occur in both, and these are telltale signs of what is about to happen. This morning, we are fortunate to hear both calls, that of Samuel in the Old Testament and that of Philip and Nathanael in the New Testament. Old Testament calls are typically known as prophetic calls. One is called by God to be a prophet. We hear of the prophets of old, such as Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and Elijah. Then we hear of those who write the prophecies, prophets such as Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. And then there are the prophets to kings, such as Samuel and Nathan. In the Old Testament, or the Hebrew Scriptures, prophetic calls always occur in the same way. First, God literally happens to someone, usually in the form of just a voice, but sometimes with both a voice and an angel or messenger. That person almost always tries to get out of it, and then they accept, usually with words, "Here I am, Lord, your servant." Does anyone ever say no? Well, we're not sure, because all that has been handed down to us are the stories of the ones who said yes. In the New Testament, the call is slightly different. Here we have a living being who appears in person to talk to the one being called. At first, it's an angel, and then Christ himself. Before Christ is born, the call more closely resembles that of the Old Testament, as with Zechariah and Mary. Then, when Christ comes, the call becomes a personal invitation. Follow me, or come and see. The 12 disciples are called in this manner. All offer little or no hesitation. So we have our responses. Here I am, Lord, and come and see, or follow me. Samuel follows the first, and Philip and Nathanael the second. In our Old Testament reading this morning, we find Samuel alongside Eli, the priest. Eli has been given care of the boy Samuel, son of Hannah and Elkanah, who is in training to be a priest of the temple himself. At this point, Samuel has not yet experienced God, that is, God has not happened to him yet. When the Lord calls, Samuel naturally thinks it's Eli and goes to him with the familiar response, "Here I am." After 3 times, Eliza realizes what is going on and tells Samuel to say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." Samuel complies and hears all that God has to tell him. Thus begins his prophetic career, one in which he will see the rise of the united monarchy under Saul. On the other side, we join Jesus shortly after he had called his first disciple, Andrew, to come and see. After hearing John the Baptist call Jesus the Lamb of God, Andrew inquires as to where he is staying, for he is interested in hearing more from this Jesus. Jesus simply says, "Come and see." At this, Andrew follows him, then brings to him his brother Simon, called Keyse, which means head, or Peter, Petra, which means rock. The next day, Jesus goes to Galilee and calls Philip, saying, "Follow me." And Philip, in turn, brings Nathanael. And now it is Philip's turn to give the invitation, saying to Nathanael, "Come and see." John is the only one of the gospel writers to name Nathanael, and it is believed that this is the same person called Bartholomew in the synoptic gospels. Nathanael asks Jesus, "Where did you get to know me?" Jesus tells him that he saw him under the fig tree before Philip called him. Jesus knows these men and women before they are called, just as God knew the men and women in the Old Testament before they were called. This all works nicely with our psalm this morning. "Lord, you have searched me out and known me." Jesus links this call of Nathanael back to the Old Testament, again showing that he is indeed the bridge between the two. He tells Nathanael, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. And very truly I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." In both cases, Jesus is referring back to Jacob, the scheming and conniving son of Isaac, who cheats his brother Esau out of his birthright. Jacob has a vision in which he sees a ladder coming out of heaven to earth, with angels ascending and descending on it. Later, as he understands God's calling, he is renamed Israel, for he is made clean in the eyes of the Lord. Nathanael, then, is not like Jacob, but without deceit like Israel. In the vision, Jacob's ladder is Christ himself. Jesus is the ladder, the gateway between heaven and earth, and upon him do the angels ascend and descend. So where do we fit into all of this? Where is our calling? We were definitely called in 2020 to continue to do the Lord's work in this place. A strange year, yes, but I believe we rose to the challenge and answered that call, and we still are. January started out well. I started the year by meeting with the first couple whose wedding I would officiate at the cathedral. I have yet to officiate a wedding at the cathedral, which gives you some indication about what was coming. We were also planning and getting ready for my installation as your 9th dean. We had the installation and reception, and it was wonderful. And thank you again to everyone who helped make it wonderful. Soon after, I had lunch with the children and families of the cathedral in order to get to know one another. Later, I toured the Nourish Keyse facilities and started to feel like I was getting my feet under me. I admitted youth confirmands and conducted my first annual meeting. All in all, a good start. February started off fantastically as well. Not only did I start an adult inquirer confirmation class, but the Chiefs gave me a welcome to Kansas City gift by winning the Super Bowl. Very exciting. I was continuing to settle in as your dean as I got a new passport so I could travel to Canada for the upcoming North American Deans Conference in April, which didn't happen. It's not happening this year either. So that passport will be ready to go when I attend that conference in 2022, also in Canada. In February, I attended my first Northwest Metro Deanery meeting some of my colleagues for the first time. Then Paula Connors, Julie Toma, and I attended the Consortium of Endowed Episcopal Parishes, or SEEP, conference in Louisville, Kentucky. This was the first time the cathedral had attended in a few years, and what a wonderful conference it was. We came back with lots of excitement and good ideas. We had a vestry retreat planned for early March, and I was feeling good about our future and looking forward to all that we could accomplish together. Everything seemed to be operating the way it should, and I was continuing to plan meetings with various ministry groups at the cathedral in order to build our relationships. We moved the Sunday pancake breakfast to be a pancake supper on Shrove Tuesday. There was a great first-time turnout, and we were excited about being able to build on this event. On Ash Wednesday, we did 3 services as we began our Lenten walk to the cross. We also continued our tradition of doing joint Stations of the Cross services with the Cathedral Church of the Immaculate Conception, our neighbors up the street. And we held our first Friday stations there at Immaculate Conception. In March, the first Sunday in Lent went off without a hitch, except for the fact that we had to say goodbye to the Reverend Canon Christy Dorn. Christy preached at both morning services, and we had a farewell reception for her in Founders Hall, thanking her for her years of service at the cathedral. During the next week, I continued to meet with ministry groups at the cathedral and started my first Wednesday night Lenten program, consisting of dinner and a class on the book of Revelation. We had so many people show up that night that we ran out of food. We saw this as a good sign of things to come. The youth joined us for Compline that night as we closed out the evening. 2 days later, we hosted our first Stations of the Cross, and on that Saturday, we held our vestry retreat at HJ's. I thought we had a great retreat as we learned a lot about our collective history at Grace and Holy Trinity and looked deeply at revitalizing our committee activity and rethinking our mission statement and strategic plan as we moved forward in a new era at the cathedral. Sunday, March 8th, the second Sunday in Lent, started off as normally as one would expect. I have here, I've saved this back in the vestry room. This is the attendance sheet from the 10:15 service on that day, March the 8th. We had 152 people at the 10:15 service. We had 31 at the 8 o'clock service and 15 that evening at the 5 o'clock service. There was excitement in the air, having just come off the vestry retreat, and I was happy to share with the congregation what we had discussed. Then, after all the services that day, things slowly began to change. That night, I found out that someone who had been at the SEEP conference had tested positive for COVID-19. Yes, we had been hearing about COVID-19 for several weeks, but did not quite know a whole lot about it yet. As the week went on, we continued to operate as normal. More news of COVID outbreaks continued to be reported throughout the world and even in our country. Attendance at our second Wednesday Lenten series was down from the week before, but we weren't too worried about it. It would bounce back. That evening, I found out 2 more people from SEEP had tested positive. On Thursday of that week, I had coffee in my office with the executive director of SEEP, and he confirmed the 3 cases, but I did not know the names of those who had tested positive at that point. On Friday, we had our third Stations of the Cross at Immaculate Conception. On Saturday, I found out 6 people from SEEP were now positive, all people who had attended meetings specifically for rectors and deans, meetings I had attended. Names were released, and I realized that I had eaten dinner with one of them and breakfast with 2 others. It was obvious I had been around these people, but I didn't have any symptoms. I consulted with the vestry, and the decision was made to cancel services for Sunday. The vestry called everyone in the directory to inform them. I wrote a letter that was emailed to the parish and posted on our website explaining why services were canceled. I also went to the ER to have a COVID test, which came back negative. That Sunday, using Facebook Live, I read morning prayer from my kitchen table. Well, my cat and I read morning prayer. Little did I know that we had done our last in-person service from inside the cathedral. Lockdown in the metro began the next day. That Wednesday, I conducted my first staff gathering and first Lenten program via Zoom, and the rest is history. Over the next several weeks, Zoom got easier, as did our live streaming the service from the nave on Sunday mornings. The world may have shut down, but the work of the cathedral went on. Over the next month, we remained quite busy as we figured out what we would do for the rest of Lent, Holy Week, and Easter. None of us could imagine having to do Holy Week and Easter virtually, but it was the only choice we had. I continued to do a Lenten program with Compline through the end of Lent. The staff, vestry, and I decided to find a way to safely distribute palms and communion to anyone who wanted them for Palm Sunday and Easter. Thanks to the help of the vestry, we called everyone in the directory and asked if they would like us to deliver palms and communion to them. We assured them we would take safety precautions while packaging items and while delivering, wearing both a mask and gloves while we did this. Some people excitedly said they wanted it, and others cautiously declined, but appreciated the offer. With the help of Julie Thoma, Janet Sweeting, and Christy Moore, we made delivery kits with palms and communion and information about our Holy Week and Easter services. Then, with the help of 17 volunteer drivers, we delivered these kits to over 100 households all across the metro area. It was a joy to bring what we do at the cathedral to all of you. During Holy Week, we live-streamed a service every day, had a collaborative diocesan Easter vigil here at the cathedral, virtually, and celebrated Easter with the bishop. It took the work of many people to make all of this happen, and I am forever grateful to my staff, the vestry, and all who volunteered to help with the deliveries and the production. Thank you. With Easter behind us and still not knowing when this pandemic would slow down and we could return to in-person worship, we moved forward. Some highlights over the rest of the spring included a virtual Youth Sunday with a service done via Zoom by the youth and overseen by Alexandra Connors, as well as regular meetings by the vestry to move forward on our goal to rethink our mission statement. When we reached the unofficial start of summer, Memorial Day, something happened which shook this country once again. Not only was the pandemic in full swing, but now the event that took place in Minneapolis, the death of George Floyd at the hands of police officers, threw this country into a deep period of unrest over racial relations and the use of police force. We saw demonstrations all across the country. Black Lives Matter now a full part of our conversation. Protests taking place, which were for the most part intended to be peaceful, but many turned violent. In the wake of these events, we learned of other people, such as Breonna Taylor, who had died senselessly at the hands of police or due to racial divides. We as a nation had to face the history of systemic racism in this country and finally begin to do something about it. We saw statues of controversial figures either removed or torn down, and debates about changing names on monuments, schools, military bases, and other places that had ties to those with deep racist roots. During this time, I participated in a prayer vigil held at St. Augustine's, joining with bishops and clergy from the Diocese of Kansas, and the Evangelical Lutheran Diocese of the Central States. Here we joined together to pray for peace, reconciliation, and healing for our nation. Later, members of the cathedral joined together for the Pray on Troost event as we stood together and prayed in silent prayer for an hour on Troost, forming a human prayer chain over 10 miles long. It remained important that we continued to pray for our nation and for one another, even though we were not able to physically be together in the cathedral and pray and worship. We opened the cathedral to you. We began opening the cathedral on Wednesdays for you to register for a time slot and come be in this magnificent place for prayer and reflection. The response was overwhelming as many of you signed up, one person or family unit at a time, to be in this space. We continue to do this for anyone who wants to sign up and come. Over the summer, the vestry concluded its work on the mission statement, and that new statement was added to our website and to future publications. We now looked to update the strategic plan and began something that we thought would eventually help us in that endeavor. After discussions with David Tellep, our treasurer, and the Finance Committee, we formed a budget contingency committee to look at how we might deal with financial shortfalls in 2020 and continue successfully into 2021 and beyond. Because we were not worshiping together at the cathedral, but virtually, we knew giving would be down. Other programs would suffer because we were not physically present in the buildings. We were not able to hold weddings, nor could outside groups continue to utilize our space. We needed a plan to move forward and still be strong. Amazingly, all of you helped more than you know. Giving stayed relatively steady as people continued to pay their pledges and also gave online. Giving was not as high as it would have been had we been here in person, but we were pleasantly surprised by what was being given since we shut down. Thank you for that. We were also fortunate to receive a payroll protection program loan, which allowed us to operate at a more normal level for 2020. But what about 2021? How do we continue to move forward? The budget contingency group kept meeting and developed 5 categories we needed to look at to see potential savings or potential revenue: long-range planning, buildings and grounds, personnel, pledging and stewardship, and congregational development and growth. Vestry members were assigned to each group, with the exception of personnel, which was overseen by the senior warden and me. We invited some parishioners to join as well, and our groups were formed and started meeting. In the fall, each group presented their findings to the vestry, and a plan was put in place as we began budgeting for 2021. Because of these meetings, we made a few changes to personnel and have started the process to do a full facilities assessment to see how we might revitalize our spaces to invite more use once we can be fully operational. A big part of this you heard me announce recently is we would like to make the kitchen in Lower Founders function again and would like your help to serve on the committees that will do that. Thank you to everyone who served on these contingency groups and all who will serve in 2021 to help see the implementation of some of these ideas. Thank you as well to Steve Moore and our stewardship committee who helped kick off our 2021 campaign, Renew, Restore, Return, in August. Pledges continue to come in, and as always, it's never too late to make a pledge. We will gladly receive it, and I thank you in advance. As we moved into the fall, knowing we still couldn't safely hold in-person services inside, we decided to start in-person services outside. For the months of September and October, we held a 5 p.m. service on the lawn. We required masks and social distancing between family units. We averaged 50 to 60 people at each service, and it was great to be together again with all who came to those services. We had hoped to move the 5 o'clock service inside starting in November, or at least in Advent. But with news of the coronavirus getting worse, we felt it best not to do this. I know this was disappointing. It was disappointing to me as well. But I take it as my responsibility to keep all of you safe. One way we did our best to continue to bring the cathedral to you was through a series of drive-through days at the cathedral. We had a fall festival where we distributed formation materials for that time of year, as well as communion for All Saints Sunday. We held another one to distribute Advent materials and again to hand out communion for Christmas and materials for chalking your door at Epiphany. We also collected food during these events, and boy, did you come through with your donations. And you can read the full report of the Social Outreach Committee as well as other ministries at Grace and Holy Trinity in the annual report. As unthinkable as it was not to be together for Easter, we realized we were facing the fact that we wouldn't be able to be in person for Thanksgiving, Advent lessons and carols, or Christmas, and made the hard decision to pre-record these services. We also pre-recorded a children's Christmas pageant to air before our Christmas Eve service. All in all, I believe we have risen to the challenges 2020 has given us, always being resilient and always finding a way to make it happen. I can't say thank you enough to everyone who has helped through 2020 and continues to help now. To some, it may seem like everything works as it always had. But the truth is, we've all had to work harder than ever to make things seem as normal as possible. Everyone has worked above and beyond to bring to all of you the best we have to offer. For that, I am eternally grateful. To my staff, thank you. To Angie and the property staff who have maintained our buildings and even shined them up a bit, thank you. To the vestry, to Paula, our senior warden, and Richard, our junior warden, thank you. To all committees who have continued to work tirelessly throughout 2020 to make sure things still happened the way they needed to happen. To Paul and the music department, thank you for finding a way to continue the fine tradition of music at the cathedral. Thank you to the choir, the full choir who was with us until we shut down, and our chancel choir who is with us now. Thank you for enriching us with your voices each week. And to Paul and Mark, who bring us concert-quality organ voluntaries for every service. And to Linda, who continues to keep the children engaged. It all makes a difference. Thank you. To our production team, Julie and Chris, we wouldn't be able to go live without you. Literally, it's happened. We haven't been able to go live sometimes. You are vital to the ministry of the cathedral, and I look forward to getting new equipment eventually to make live streaming even better. You have adapted and adjusted quickly over the year. To all who make Sunday morning possible, whether here or behind the scenes from home, thank you to Linda, to Julie Brogno, to Christy, to Janet, to Rick and Melissa. I couldn't do it without all of you. Thank you to the ongoing ministries of the cathedral, such as the Women's Bible Study, Young Adults, Lectionary Group, and Cathedral Cafe, among others. Groups who continue to meet week after week and help strengthen the bonds of our community. To those who continue to join with me every Wednesday for the Dean's Forum and Compline, thank you. To all formation groups, children, youth, and adults, and all who make that happen, to Linda, to Alexandra, and to Jerry. To my wife, Beth, thank you for always being willing to be my sounding board and offering helpful ideas, for being my constant editor, and for keeping me sane and calm through this pandemic time. And finally, thank you to all of you who tune in and watch us, to all who volunteer when we need help, who give, who pledge to the work and ministry of the cathedral. You are the lifeblood of all that we do. Thank you for supporting us and for helping to reach out to others at all times. Now our focus shifts to 2021. So where do we fit into all of this? Where is our calling? Are we called to be prophets or disciples? Called to be post-resurrection apostles? Called to be leaders of faith in our homes and businesses and communities? The answer is yes. We are called to be all of these. We are called to follow Christ, and in so doing, we become, in some sense, just like the prophets and disciples and apostles. We become the vessels for carrying Christ's message to the world. Maybe we haven't heard this call loudly enough yet, but believe me, when you do, there is no denying it. I still remember my own call. When it comes, it's not that you have no choice but to obey. That's not how God works. It is that you are overcome with wanting to obey, to follow. That is the love of Christ and the grace of God. We are invited, and we want to say yes, and we do say yes. We need to be prepared as Eli instructed Samuel, as Philip told Nathanael, when your call comes, do not go to someone else, but say, here I am, Lord. Speak, for your servant is listening. And when someone asks you what happened next, tell them, come and see.